Welcome, everybody. My name is Annie Fletcher. I'm the director of the Irish Museum of Modern Art, and I'm delighted to welcome you all here today to the first day of Earth Rising. And we are so privileged and thrilled to welcome Dr. Vandana Shiva as our first keynote speaker. We thought it was super important to be able to kick off this incredible series of talks with such an eminent and important voice in the world today. Dr. Shiva is a scholar, ecofeminist, activist, and a highly respected figure in the anti-globalist movement. She is the founder of multiple movements and organizations and has been recognized as one of the top 7 most powerful women in the globe. So what a wonderful, wonderful occasion to hear her voice in Ireland today. So Dr. Shiva, welcome and thank you for being here with us. And I will hand over to you to hear your lecture. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Annie, and it's my pleasure to join this Festival of Earth Rising. For me, it's a particular joy because I have always seen the Earth as alive and that we are, as humanity, waking up to a living Earth creates so many possibilities for our future, our common future. Of course, we've had a very divided past, and colonialism made many divisions. The 2 worldviews, one was the colonial worldview of colonizing nature, colonizing women, colonizing the future. And these were not separate processes. They are the same process because we are all interconnected. There are 2 clear worldviews. One that sees us as separate from nature and sees nature as dead. The other that sees us as part of nature and nature is alive. And these worldviews are divided according to how we think of ourselves in the world and of our relationships with the earth, with each other, and future generations. There is an epistemology that was created to allow human beings to think of themselves as rulers and masters of the earth. And this epistemology is mechanistic reductionism. It was formalized through text, through institutions, through books. When I wrote my book, Staying Alive, thinking of the connection between the violence against women and the violence against nature, I went back to read all the texts that shape our imagination today. Texts by Bacon, by Boyle, by Locke. And Bacon actually wrote a book called The Masculine Birth of Time. And in The Masculine Birth of Time, which he wrote in 1603, it was posthumously published, he actually says, I am come in the very truth to you, leading to you nature with all her children to bind her to your service and make her your slave. It was assumed that the domination of man over nature rests only in this form of dominating knowledge, the key of man's mastery over the world. And for a while, we've lived through the illusion that this is the only kind of knowledge. The rest is not knowledge. Tragically, in Europe, the most knowledgeable women were burnt during the Inquisition and the witch hunts. 9 million people were killed, most of them women. Women who were experts in healing, women who were experts about plants, about seeds of agriculture. And not only did the idea of man as superior, man as dominant, man as the master get enshrined in a few books, it became the very foundation of the colonial industrial age. As my dear friend Caroline Merchant writes in The Death of Nature, the removal of animistic organic assumptions about the cosmos constituted the death of nature. The the most far-reaching effect of the scientific revolution. Because nature was not now viewed as a system of dead, inert particles moved by external rather than inherent forces, the mechanical framework itself could legitimate the manipulation of nature. Moreover, as a conceptual framework, the mechanical order has associated with it a framework of values based on power, fully compatible with the directions taken by commercial capitalism. And we have named commercial capitalism capitalist patriarchy because it is a convergence of an economics of greed with the politics of patriarchal power, of power embodied in patriarchal form, not just in particular men, but in institutions created in patriarchal form, like the East India Company, 300 merchant adventurers, create a patriarchal form of the corporation to colonize the world, including my land, India. And institutions were created, like the Royal Society of England. The Royal Society of England was inspired by Bacon's philosophy, was clearly seen by its organizers as a masculine project. In 1664, Henry Oldenburg, the secretary of the Royal Society, announced that the intention of the society was to raise a masculine philosophy. And we call that science. Patriarchal domination has nothing to do with science and knowledge and relating to nature. And it go on to say, whereby the mind of man may be ennobled with the knowledge of solid truths. This patriarchal epistemology is what has allowed the domination and destruction of nature. And today, as the earth is rising, not that the earth wasn't alive and rising all along, but at least the human mind is opening up to her rising. Our hearts and imagination, our arts are opening up to the earth's rising. And the festival you are joining is part of that affirmation. Among the women's movement of diverse women for diversity, we have articulated the emerging epistemology, which is an ecofeminist epistemology. An ecofeminist epistemology that recognizes that nature is alive, nature is creative. Women are alive and women are creative. Nature was declared dead. Women were declared a passive second sex. And those common colonizations is what is both responsible for the violence against both, but is also what has brought us the polycrisis we face, the extinction of species. 80% insects gone, 70% birds gone in a few decades, and everyone is realizing it is related to the way we do agriculture based on fossil fuels and fossil fuel-based chemicals, and agriculture which is very, very patriarchal. And we work as women with nature in peace, recognizing her laws of diversity. We are shifting from the monoculture of the mind, which goes with masculinity, to the diversity of the mind. We're moving from monocultures to diversity. We are recognizing that the world is not based on competition. Otherwise, there would be no life if life was constantly competing with each other. Just today, while I was at our Navdanya farm, I took a photograph of a beautiful millet growing tall. And around her is woven a beautiful beanstalk, speaking cooperation. Symbiosis, the supporting of each other, the mycorrhizal fungi in the soil, supporting the plant, and the plant feeding the fungi, or the bees and the pollinators coming to the flower to take pollen, to make honey, but in the process, giving us the next generation of the seed, of the fertility, of the renewal of life. That symbiosis, that cooperation is the very basis of life. And because life is alive because it's not linear in extraction. It is circular. Life works in circles of giving back. And ecofeminists are evolving. The new articulation of a real economy, the art of living, as the art of the gift, of the art of the gratitude. Living systems are not just creative. All words for nature, all words for women, all words in different languages articulate the creativity of women and the creativity of nature. Kriti is our word. Prakriti is the name for nature. But I am sure in your rich Irish language, you will find so many connections. The idea of a dead earth created in economics of creating death and destruction because it could not see the living processes. It defined life as non-existent. So nature does not produce. The seed does not produce more seed. And it's only when you shoot a gene into a plant, you have an intellectual property right. And now you declare you are the inventors of seed, you're the inventors of life. And that's why jokingly I often say, GMO in the vocabulary of the patriarchs of today is God over. Creativity is only our domain, and our creativity is violence. Our creativity is destruction. And this ontological confusion at the most basic level is what is behind the multiple crises of today. The health pandemic, the hunger pandemic, poverty pandemic, the climate emergency, the extinction emergency, the emergency of deep polarization, both in philosophies as well as in economic polarization. The worldview of separation engenders hierarchies, and the absolutely illusionary hierarchy created between humans and nature through anthropocentrism and between women and men through patriarchy are not just unnecessary, they're so violent. We are one earth family. And in the earth family, there is no separation. There is no superiority. There is no ecological apartheid. In the earth family, we are one brilliant family. And in this family of the earth, in the earth democracy, as I call it, in Gaia's democracy, everyone lives together. There is no privileged species. There is no privileged gender. There is no privileged class. We are all part of the flow of life. And the flow of life increases the more we give. The more I take care of the soil, the more food I'm able to grow. The more biodiversity I grow, and this is the work I do in Nabdanya. The more intensive our biodiversity, the more crops we plant together. Nabdanya means 9 crops. Bharanaja means 12 crops. The richer the diversity, the more the nutrition. We have measured how biodiversity produces more nutrition per acre than the chemical monocultures. And what matters in food is the nutrition, not the commodity that gets traded. In the patriarchal economics, based on extraction and giving nothing back, what is measured is what's taken out and traded. So what's measured is growth as GDP, gross domestic product. And the definitions of these measures of national account says, if you produce what you consume, you don't produce. Now, women are the biggest producers, but they produce for community, for family, for the earth. And therefore, their work is not counted. Their production is not counted, even though the majority of farmers of the world are women. And most food that's eaten by people is produced by women. Industrial corporations produce commodities. 90% of the corn and soya of the world, and it's the crop, these 2 crops are the ones that are expanding into Argentina, into Amazon, in the Midwest, and in Canada, and even in Europe. It's going for animal feed and for biofuel. It's not feeding people. So you can grow more and more commodities and create more and more hunger. You can create more and more commodities and create more and more disease, because food and health are deeply connected. And not just the health of people, but the health of the planet herself. Over these many, many decades, I've realized that the earth is alive, and the earth creates a climate. Over 4 billion years, our amazing living earth created microbes and then plants with the power of photosynthesis. A hot planet of 290 degrees was turned into a cool planet of 17 degrees. And that's how humans as a species were able to evolve. A carbon dioxide rich planet of 98%, 4,000 parts per million, was transformed into an oxygen rich planet with carbon dioxide reduced from 98% to 0.03%. Just imagine a miracle. And where did the miracle come from? Nature's technology of photosynthesis. Taking the free sunlight as energy through the green leaf of the plant and its power of photosynthesis, absorbing the carbon dioxide, transforming it into the molecule of life. The carbohydrates that give us food, that give us fiber. But more than that, the oxygen that gives us breath. This, to me, is earth rising. And the day we start realizing that the earth is rising all the time, that's how we are alive. From the earth, we get food. From the earth, we get water. From the earth, we get our breath. And the entire economic system rests on the earth's ability to create the infrastructure of life. This is the infrastructure that women renew, regenerate, and sustain on a daily basis. If we were living on the extractive economy, there wouldn't be society, there wouldn't be community. If we have food to eat, it's because quietly, small farmers are providing 80% of the food. The huge commodities are being traded, but they account for only 20% of what we eat. And that too is junk food and bad food. I see fossil energy that has polluted the atmosphere, undermined the Earth's capacity to regulate her own climate, and bring down the temperatures, bring down the carbon dioxide. This dysfunctionality, I call it the metabolic disorder of the Earth. Just like we are facing metabolic disorders because of junk food, ultra-processed food. And this is scientifically established, hundreds and thousands of papers. But what is missing is the connection between living food that sustains all life on Earth and the web of life, and the living Earth systems that sustain the balance of the Earth. Earth rising is basically understanding more deeply the interconnectedness between the biosphere and the atmosphere, between the plants and the soils, between the soil, the plants, and our gut microbiome, 100 trillion of us, and between our gut microbiome and our mind and our brain. Our grandmothers used to say, you are what you eat. Your mind is what you eat. Jaisa anna vaisa man, we say. You think according to the food you eat. And this brain-gut axis is now getting established again through science. Just in the last 10 years, we need now to connect the power of the Earth rising, her potential to regenerate, to our duties, as well as the power of women. We cannot have partial liberations. There cannot be a liberation for humans while we have an oppression of the Earth. You cannot have a liberation of powerful men while ordinary people are crushed. You definitely cannot have a liberation for men while women and nature are crushed. We are interconnected. We are one Earth family in one common flux, one in symbiosis, a creative mind, a creative energy. And this allows us to not just be aware through Earth Rising of our part, of women rising, of ordinary human beings rising in their capacity. And for this, we have to turn to the Earth as our teacher. If the Earth could cool the planet from 290 degrees to 13 degrees, if we work on the principles of the Earth of biodiversity intensification, photosynthesis intensification, intensification of care rather than violence, of giving back, of circularity rather than extraction, we can address the polycrisis. We can have more food, we can have more nutritious food, women can be more at the center of the economy, leading the way for the others. Nature can be more at the center of the economy. After all, economy means the art of living. And to understand the art of living, we have to turn to those who give us life, the earth herself, as well as women who sustain life. We have to remember that for 99.99% of the time of evolution on this planet, we haven't been around. We are young siblings. Our elders are the microbes and the plants. And among the human community, women and indigenous people are those who have sustained the deep connection between a living nature and living society. The patriarchal economics has reduced economics to merely growth and profits. Mariamis, my dear colleague, who wrote the book Ecofeminism with me, whom we lost some months ago, we called the system capitalist patriarchy. And we saw it as a worldview and a system of knowledge, as organizing everything as trade and commerce, everything as profits and power. The founding fathers of this system consciously constructed anthropocentrism. And 500 years of violence separated colonized people from their land and their homes. They separated the earth from human beings. They separated men and women. Ecofeminism is a worldview that recognizes that humans are part of nature, not separate from the earth, in their interconnectedness through nature and women. Through life, nature and women are alive and autonomous. They're agents of life. They're not dead, passive objects to be exploited and violated by masculine power. Powerful men are not their masters and owners. We are part of one interconnected living earth family of an amazing terra madre. And as we've written in the draft declaration of the rights of Mother Earth, we, the people and nations of the earth, consider that we are part of Mother Earth, an indivisible living community of interrelated and interdependent beings with a common destiny, gratefully acknowledging that Mother Earth is the source of life, nourishment, and learning, and provides everything we need. And since we are part of an earth family, we are all equal. Humans cannot be divided. Our unity as humans flows from our unity with the earth. We are removing the illusions and blinkers and biases of capitalist patriarchy. We are recognizing the creativity and productivity of nature, of women, respecting the economy, autonomy, and rights. And it's this idea of separation of women and nature, or a separation of humans and nature and women and men, which also led to the separation of ecology and economics. Economics was reduced to money-making. Chromatistics is what Aristotle called it. And ecology was then also not seen as the rich processes of earth rising. It was again reduced to partial frameworks, as we are seeing a lot in today's greenwashing. If you have climate change, what are you supposed to do? Change the climate more through geoengineering. It's a very wrong way of thinking. If the living earth creates the climate, our role has to be to serve the living earth so she can regulate her climate, not more control, not more mastery, not more engineering. And if 75% of the chronic diseases we are suffering from are coming from ultra-processed industrial globalized food. The answer cannot be more industrial food, more fake food. I have heard that there is an attempt to get rid of a number of animals in Ireland. But there is no ecosystem without animals. Animals, trees, crops, humans are part of one living ecosystem. We cannot get rid of any of this without having huge implications for both the future of the planet and our own future. The idea that there are dispensable species, there are dispensable people, there are dispensable plants that can be sprayed with glyphosate, there are dispensable insects that can be killed with insecticides, is what has led to the contemporary crisis. If instead of powerful men dominating over nature and women and being the model of economic man, if we had thought of women taking care of the earth as the primary economic actor, which they are, if you actually think of the care in the world, the food we eat, when we are sick, who takes care of us, things totally shift. You look at the economics of greed, extraction, profits, there's one kind of economy you see. When you look at care, relationships, love, compassion, there's another economy. As Ronnie Lesson and Alexander Sheffer in their book on alternative economies has said, if the fathers of capitalist theory had chosen a mother rather than a single bourgeois male as the smallest economic unit for their theoretical constructions, they would have been able to formulate the axiom of the selfish nature of human beings in the way they would not have been able to formulate the axiom of the selfish nature of human beings in the way we did. We are interconnected beings. We are earth beings. The same food and water that flows through the soil and the plants and the atmosphere becomes our food and our water. And it's this interconnectedness that is both the source of our power, but also the source of our humility. When we've only been around 0.01%, when we're a tiny bit of the web of life, with humility and with compassion, we increase our capacities to take care. And when care, rather than greed, is put at the center of the economy, women become the central actors rather than powerful men who are only looking for the next billions they can make. On the one hand, we are living in the tragedy of extinction. We're living in the tragedy of collapse. And a lot of people turn to despair and hopelessness in this moment. But that despair comes from only thinking in anthropocentric form. We think of the sages as Anthropocene. No, we will always be a speck in the works of the earth and the works of the universe. It will always be an ecocene. Earth has always been rising. And she's rising with a little more noise to remind us that she's living. It's time for us to not just listen to her. It's time for us to learn from her. It's time for us to feel her pain, because she, as a living being, she has pain. And it's time for us to know that when we harm the earth, we harm ourselves. When we take care of the earth, we take care of the human community and future generations. That is why I repeatedly say the colonization of nature, women, and future generations is one colonization. The liberation and decolonization of nature and women and future generation is also one indivisible liberation and freedom. Freedom, not in individual greed, but freedom in interconnected life. It's a major moment to make a paradigm shift. We are capable of it. And for that, we have to turn to the earth rising to teach us new ways to think, new ways to be creative. And that's why it's not an accident that a museum of art is talking about the earth rising. My love to all of you. can't hear you, Annie. Can't hear you.
Sorry, I was so enthusiastic, I forgot to unmute. Thank you so much. There's so many things that are striking, and I'd love if it's possible to just talk to you about. What's striking, I think, is this sense of optimism and love and possibility. And I was very struck by what you said about this idea that despair is kind of surrounded by maybe a very limited idea of time in the Anthropocene, and that if we understand actually the Ecocene and this broader possibility that our time is a speck in the development and the possibility of the Earth, that's a very reassuring and optimistic thought, is it not?
I think the combination that we are in a very particular age, and despair also comes from the limitation of our sense of our being. If we only see ourselves as human beings, separated from the rest of the earth, our capacities shrink. Then we come out of a passive witnessing of an age of decline. But when we see ourselves as part of the web of life and Earth Rising as the creative web of life, then we look for the role we can play in not harming the web, but regenerating it. And that in particular places is extremely clear. I think the other big thing is we've been made to always think from the top down. That's what the patriarchal idea is, from the top down. And then we think, climate change, global problem. But climate change global problem begins with particular places where we emit from oil and coal and gas. And those particular places add up to be the planetary problem. But in a very simple way, of regeneration with the earth, knowing the earth's capacity to rise, serving her in the appropriate way, become very many actions that add up to a planetary scale. In a similar way, if destruction can be planetary, regeneration can be planetary, but from the ground up. That's where women become central actors.
I love this model also of the woman as the primary economic actor. I mean, you've done such a beautiful elidation and a very precise one of the incredibly damaging legacy of patriarchy and institutions, sort of, as you said, created in patriarchal form. So not only I'm taking away this idea of economy meaning the art of living, which I think is a beautiful readjustment and a very useful one, but also this idea of that deep diving into the labor and the possibility of woman and feminism and ecofeminism, of course, as the extension of that, as this incredible empire of possibility or planetary possibility. I have one remark which I just really loved, and I really wanted to just comment on when you were talking about the diversity of language and the possibility of language, and you were saying, I'm sure the Irish language has many diverse sort of names and ideas in relation to nature and its relationship to kind of the diversity of the earth. And indeed, there's a recent publication, I just thought it's nice for you to know, it's called The Irish Language Has 32 Words for Field. And
wow.
Yeah, it's a beautiful book by Manchan Manga.
Yeah.
So maybe I'll send it to you. It's actually to do with the complexity of course, this indigenous language anyway. But the title is actually, it's naming of the land and the idea that there's 32 words to understand that concept.
And I'm just thinking in the desert of Rajasthan, which is a desert and has lack of rain, they've got a similar number of ways to describe the rain. Because, and the same for Eskimos, they have how many names for the snow? Because when you are in deep relationships with a living earth, then all the different facets of the amazing earth come to you. In fact, I support my laptop with books. And right on top in front of me is a book called Lalita Sahasranam, which means the 1,000 names of the dance Lalitanu, the creative energy of the universe. There are 1,000 names. And sometime in Earth Rising, you were to do this amazing convergence of diversity, because it was that to meet, we must be monocultures. No, to meet, we can stay diverse and realize we're talking about the same thing. Absolutely. We're talking about the same living Earth.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're refusing these kind of epistemological hierarchies in a way, or limits. I think that's super interesting.
Yeah.
I had another question, and maybe it's a stupid one, but it's one just for me to try and understand. I thought it was super interesting how you were calling the epistemology of patriarchy and the problematic development of capitalism and sort of the destruction of the earth as a kind of mechanistic reductionism. And I was wondering, is that another word for modernism? I mean, we're all grappling with the idea right now of the, we're in the Irish Museum of Modern Art. We're looking at the processes and the legacies of modernization as a kind of, it's maybe not as precise a term, but I wonder, a lot of our task at the moment is to imagine what these modern or museums of modernity, the edifices of modernity might become. And sort of sometimes we think the notion of the demodern, but I suspect that's too simplistic.
I don't think you need to say demodern, as you will see, I wear my sari. Now, a lot of the women of India have been convinced that the sari is obsolete and the torn jeans is modern. But that's a marketing step by fast fashion. Modern means of an age, of our time. So if today in 2023, I'm wearing a sari, it's modern, And the idea that modern is not so much of a point in time, but much more an hierarchy of organization. Are you modern in the sense, do you use fossil fuels? I've worked in this field for so long. I remember the early World Bank loans that came to us were all about making us modern on energy. And we were pushed on the fossil fuel track. We were made modern on pesticide use. And we destroyed our land. And we have the most amazing hundreds of ways to control pests without using poisons. And more importantly, we were asked to be modern and use plastic, because how can you use beautiful baskets woven by hand with bamboo? How can you have earthen pots? Well, you must have, in fact, I fought a World Bank project in my region because our women, when they go to the mountains to get the spring water, and they really depend on their springs, they go with a brass pot. And the World Bank financed a whole project of substituting brass pots, which can go down 20 generations, with plastic pots, which would become plastic waste in half a year. So I think modernity as a label linked to a particular way of living is where the oppression comes from. As long as it is about a time, 2020 to 2023, fine, whatever's happening at that time. If people are doing Irish folk dances, that's modern. If people are turning to ecological agriculture, if people are turning to their 30 languages of the field, that's modern. So we need to reclaim. But when you said, is it the same? Is it mechanistic reductionism? So, but mechanistic philosophy is what was named as the fragmenting philosophy of a dead earth that Bacon created. And as I read out, that was the philosophy for the Royal Society that became the place from where science spread. I went on to add reductionism to it because, I did my PhD in the foundations of quantum theory. And quantum theory is about interconnectedness. And so I realized there's a way of thinking of the world as a machine and a way of thinking of the world in separation. Reductionism is you separate and reduce everything to one. So, for example, the climate system is a very complex system of hydrology, of rain. Look at the rains in Greece. of floods, it's not just, and it's not about one element alone. There's so many processes to reduce it to carbon alone, and then to reduce all carbon to one carbon. But there's dead carbon, which is a fossil carbon, and there's living carbon, which is you and me and the plants that feed us. And the idea of mechanistic reductionism takes the life away from the earth, whereas relationships, which are both there in indigenous knowledge, it's there in women's knowledge, it's there in quantum theory, it's there in all deep ecology, that is ecological thinking. So on the one hand, you have mechanistic reductionism, which reduces life to a machine and then separates the parts and puts it in the hands of an external controller. Mm-hmm. On the other hand, you have life as self-organized complexity, and life as art form, life as a constant making of harmony and music. And I think that's the new interconnection we need to make. That's where modern art then becomes the art of living.
That's a beautiful note to kind of think on, especially with our audience and all of the participants here in the Eco Festival. We started last year, and you can see in the background, it's the remaining edifices of kind of British colonial empire is the ground, but also this incredible 48 acres of land. And it's very much a kind of citizens' assembly, an artistic assembly. It's a bringing together of creativity that you've spoken so beautifully about. So I'm just wondering if you have any last words of advice for all of us here who are engaged with artistic practice but also determined to think about food justice, social justice, and planetary justice.
Yeah, just like we have to shed all false hierarchies in order to reclaim our true humanity and our true earth being and our true potential. Part of what we have to shed is the idea that art is an inferior way of knowing and expressing. It was always put down in the hierarchy of knowledges, where mechanistic reductionism put itself there. But, as you'll see, Einstein is the person who inspired me. And, I had a little break between my master's and my Ph.D. And I did sculpting. And I sculpted that bust of Einstein. So I had a little part of my life doing art. And Einstein basically said, deep science is knowing the art of how nature works. So I think we need much more overcoming of false hierarchies, because all hierarchies are false, and noticing the commonality of creative pattern making and recognizing beauty and making beauty everywhere. And realizing that whether it's science or whether it's art, whether it's sculpting or whether it's a painting or whether it's a festival and people coming together, or it's a farmer growing food. A farmer is both the ultimate scientist, but the ultimate artist who recognize, those many names of the field. Only an artist can know all those dimensions of the field. And I think, and these are the new possibilities and new convergences that for me create, in the middle of an overwhelming sense of collapse, a new rising of hope and creativity among humans with earth rising. Because we will not see our power till we see ourselves. But the more we realize our smallness in the context of the earth, the more our potential and consciousness expands.
That's really...
And I think that is what I hope your festival will bring.
We will take your message to our hearts very much. We're very honored to have you, Dr. Shiva. Thank you so much for spending time with us. And
Thank you so much.
Here in Ireland.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.